Hello everybody, welcome back. This is Mandy, and I wanted to do a quick little video to address a question I get a lot, so hopefully this will be pretty short. I also want to show you how you can use these two products and incorporate this product for blooms. But first, I get questions a lot about what is the difference between Vivid PolyPour from Colourarte and Vivid Enamel from Colourarte. So I'm going to try to give you like the simplest answer and then kind of explain how you might use them a little bit differently. So hopefully this won't be very long. We're not going to do any painting today, so it might be a little bit boring, but it can be very informative. This is a question I had a while back too. So I want to start with the Vivid Enamel. So this is a high gloss, untinted paint base. And because it's an enamel base, you can use it on pretty much any surface. So Colourarte has how you can use it to mix your Bling It micas and your primary elements on the label. But I still want to just kind of explain it very briefly. So this is essentially untinted paint. So if you're using a primary element, you are creating your own paint because primary elements are a dry paint system. So they don't just have mica like the Bling It product does. They have mica for that sparkle and dried paint pigment. So they have to have an acrylic binder to become paint. Otherwise, they're never gonna kind of gel together like paint needs to. So that's what this is basically if you were to take a tube paint and take the color out of the tube paint and the paint base was enamel, that's what this would be. So just kind of for the sake of reconciling it in your brain, just pretend that this is like a clear tube paint for lack of a better term. And so if I'm going to do like regular acrylic pouring, I can use this as a base to incorporate my Bling It pigments, my primary elements. You can use this to thicken up regular paint. If you have, let's say you want to use a fluid paint like this one, these are very thin, right? So if I was going to use this in a ring pour, this is too thin. So I would have to either incorporate this into a thicker pouring medium or thicken it up somehow. So even though this is not a Colourarte product, I could use something like a fluid, golden fluid or something like that in this paint base and give myself a medium to heavy body type body. So there's a lot of ways that you can use that. So if you create paint using this, then before you pour, you would want to thin it down so you could use it. So if you're going to thin it down, you could thin it down with PolyPour, which is Colourarte's pouring medium. You could also thin it down with a little bit of water. You can also thin it down with pouring medium like Liquitex, Golden, etc. What you don't really want to use a lot of, generally speaking, with pigments is Floetrol. Glue is kind of okay because glue has an acrylic binder, but Floetrol does not. If you're going to use pigments or primary elements or both in something that has Floetrol, understand that it can break apart your pigments and it can really mess up your paint. So this is where acrylic pouring becomes somewhat of a science experiment. If you're going to use those beautiful shimmery paints or even a heavily metallic regular paint, it can break down that pigment too. So it's important to understand kind of the science behind things sometimes, and that's kind of why I thought I would break this down for you. If I wanted to use primary elements or something in a Dutch pour where I might be using Floetrol, I would incorporate regular gel gloss to help stabilize, because this is like using 100% acrylic binder essentially. That's what the gel gloss really works out to work like. So I'm no scientist, but this stuff works like magic in a Dutch pour or something. I've also done ring pours where I mixed my like my prism pours or something with this first, and even incorporated a little bit of Floetrol, and they stayed in their own lane and all that. So those are just some additional things to consider. I'm going to show you how I like to use this with these products to help stabilize cells that you get in blooms, because pigments, when you use a lot of pigments, and I do use a lot of pigments, sometimes your bloom, for example, might seem a little bit unstable because you don't have the body of an acrylic paint if you mix pigments into like your regular pouring medium, because they're pigments, they don't have that same body, they're different. So using something like this can be a great stabilizer, and I'll show you that in a minute. So this is untintable paint. My dog's over here laying upside down. So if I use this, I'm basically going to make my own paint. And then if I want to go paint, then just like I would with regular paint, I have to find out what I'm going to use to thin it down. I can use a little bit of water at a time, a little bit of time. Anytime, no matter what your medium is, anytime you're adding water to your paint, you only add a little bit at a time and stir it in really well until you need more. Otherwise it breaks things apart. But I just need to know that if I'm going to use this and I'm going to go add something to it to paint with it, generally speaking, Floetrol is something I should avoid if I'm painting with pigments. So that's this. PolyPour is Colourarte's pouring medium. So these are designed to be used with Colourarte products. They're intentionally made with ingredients that support Colourarte products. So this product has varnish in it. So if I wanted to use Colourarte pigments to make blooms, this is essentially a bloom base. It's kind of got a thick consistency. It can be thinned down for regular acrylic pouring. I've done marble pours with this and primary elements where I just thin this down with a little bit of water to make it a little bit more fluid. So this is Colourarte's pouring medium. So you can use this with non-Colourarte products, just like the Vivid Enamel. You can also incorporate combinations of these into other things. Just understand that this is just untinted paint. This is a pouring medium that is an untinted base, just like this, but this is an actual pouring medium. It's a little bit more fluid and it has varnish in it. Also makes it dry very glossy. Now, if you wanted to use your products for various reasons, of course, there's instructions in the back how you can mix them. So this is not intended to replace the instructions. You can use these instructions for a reference point. But I also get questions about how to use these products in blooms. So I'm going to show you what I think makes them work great in blooms by incorporating golden regular gel gloss. This is something I learned from Leslie and also from Erica Hughes. And because pigments sometimes lack the thickness of a regular tube paint, sometimes they are more difficult to use in a bloom base just because blooms kind of thrive on cell stability, right? So that's why most people would tell you to make things like that work in blooms, to layer your paint, right? Some regular acrylics and pigments. You can even do a couple of pigments in between some acrylic layers. Generally speaking, your bottom layer and your top layer should be an acrylic paint. Just the chemistry of the acrylic paint is going to respond a little bit better. But this is going to help your cell stability. Now when I do blooms, I usually use the same pouring medium for everything. And I have a video for that already out on YouTube. I'll link it below. But I also want you to know how to use these products. Because what if I'm a brand new bloomer and the whole reason I bought pigments is because I wanted to use them for blooms, and maybe I don't have all the ingredients yet, and maybe I just want to use my pigments right now, right? Then I want to show you how to use them. Some people love the simplicity of just being able to pour this out of the bottle and use it. Some people prefer Vivid Enamel over any other untinted base. So, but some people also learn this way, and then when they run out and they can't yet necessarily get more right away, they want to know how to use it with their regular base. So, different strokes. So this one, keep in mind, I do not need to add polyacrylic. I don't need to add Jo Sonja. I don't need to add any varnish. What I am gonna do though, is I'm gonna add a little gel gloss. So first I wanna show you the consistency. Generally speaking, it's a good consistency for blooms. So it's a little bit thin, but it's kind of perfect for blooms. But let's say I'm going to incorporate this and I have some other colors already mixed up and my paint base is a little bit thicker and I'm worried about this being as stable as my other ones. Well, what I'm going to do is right into this, I'm going to add just a little bit of this golden regular gel gloss. So I'm going to make this size cup. So I'm not going to add very much. You know, really eyeball it. I don't have a ratio for you. I wish I was that scientific, but I am pretty scientific when it comes to my usual ratios and kind of where I start. But I'm just going to add it. It's going to be a little clumpy at first, but it sort of melts into your stuff. So don't worry about that too much. You can also do this if your pigments are just thinner and you want to thicken your base. I could also use this as a regular pouring medium for my blooms, and if I had one particular paint that was a little too thin, I could add, I mean obviously less than what I just did, but I could add a little bit of the golden gel gloss. So this is, now it's pretty thick, right? So if I go and incorporate the rest of this, voila. And you'd be amazed at that tiny little trick and how much of a difference that makes. You can do that with regular paint. If I use primary elements in a Dutch pour, I mix golden regular gel gloss into water for the consistency that I want, and then I incorporate primary elements in it. You can pre-mix it and use it for that. I have some Prism Pour that I mixed with, there you go, beautiful, a little bit more of this. I have some Prism Pour that I mixed primarily with Liquitex pouring medium, which is a great pouring medium, but it's so thin. And so I mixed it up to do a ring pour, and I knew it was too thin, and I tried it anyway. And of course, ring pour, it can't be too thin, it just turns mud. So what I'm going to do so that paint isn't wasted is I'm going to mix some gel gloss and water and thicken it up, and then I'm going to use it in a straight pour. So there's so many ways that you can make it work, but some of those things you learn over time, you know? I mean, I've been acrylic pouring for over a year now, and I remember having so many questions that I could not find answers for. And this was actually one of my questions before I knew more about Colourarte, so I figured it would be a great way to pay it forward and answer those questions for you guys. So now we got that. So next up, we're gonna put PolyPour away. Bye-bye, PolyPour. Now we're gonna introduce these two for bloom pouring medium, where this is our untinted paint base, and this is gonna be our gloss varnish. I don't really know what the ratios are because it's been a long time since I used these two together. So we're gonna discover that together. I'm gonna start with, it needs to be shaken up a little bit more than that. I'm gonna start with kind of the idea of doing three parts of the untinted base to one part gloss varnish, but I'll probably know by looking at this if I should do that. So before I incorporate the gloss varnish, I'm probably going to incorporate the gel gloss. Maybe not. Sorry, I need to get this out of here. This is a brand new bottle. Yikes. Should have checked this before I started filming, but I didn't, sorry. I'm using my weeding tool to punch it out of here. I have like a little bucket of things in this cup that I use all the time. And that's one of them, so it kind of turned out to be handy. All right, so I am gonna sort of measure. I'm going to use the same spoon as I did before. So this is pretty thin. So I'm going to start with 2 parts of this to 1 part Jo Sonja. And I'm going to kind of just add varnish as needed to thin it out. So because this is a good thin consistency, I'm going to go ahead and incorporate this little blob of gel gloss first. And I'm just going to work it in because it's going to thicken this up a little bit. So I'm going to stir it in there. Because the smaller your batch is, the easier it is to mix up. That's true of anything. If I'm thinning down paint for a regular acrylic pour, I don't generally squirt like 1/3 of a cup of paint in before I add any additives, because then I feel like it takes forever. You're mixing all day long. I actually put a little bit of fluid in the bottom, add a little paint, whip it up really good, add a little more stuff, whip it up really good. Then you're not there for half your life mixing up paint. So let's put, oh, I'm so silly. I was saying 2 parts of this to 1 part Jo Sonja. It's the opposite. I would be looking at like 4 parts of this. My brain is obviously a little fried today. So let's see if we have about what we should have before we incorporate gloss varnish. This is about the consistency I would be looking for in a bloom. So I'm going to put a tablespoon of gloss varnish in, and then we're going to add this to thicken the Vivid Enamel. So this is Jo Sonja gloss varnish. I get mine at Blick. I have a link for Blick in my description box below. It's my favorite art supply store, other than, you know, obvious things like Colourarte. All right, now I make sure I get every last drop of that out of my spoon, even if it means I get a little bit messy. So so now we're at 4 parts Vivid Enamel, a smidge of gel gloss, and 1 part gloss varnish. That's about right for a bloom consistency. It's still a little thin, so I think now we're just going to incorporate a little bit more Vivid Enamel. This might bring us up to about 5 parts. But again, even if I keep it on the thinner side, because let's say that's what you do and it's easier for you. Everybody's different. Some people have their color super thick, like so thick I couldn't blow out a bloom. And some people have theirs so thin that if I kept mine that thin, I would have no stability in my blooms at all. So everybody's different. Climate has a lot to do with that. But this is about right for me. So yeah, super simple. So if I was going to use primary elements or Bling It products in a bloom, I wouldn't even bother to mix them up first. I would mix this up, put a little in the cup, maybe not all, maybe 1/3 of what I actually need. Mix it up, stir, 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 make sure all the particulates are mixed up very well, and then add a little bit more till you get the desired amount that you want, and then off you go. I will say a good general rule when you're mixing pigments is mix them up. It doesn't matter what brand, mix them up, let them sit for an hour or 2, let some of those bubbles come to the surface, because you've introduced a lot of air as you've been mixing, and so that's just generally a good idea. But I hope this video is helpful for you. I know it's not as exciting as doing a pour, but if you already subscribed, thank you so much. If you don't already, I would love it if you would. And leave me a comment below. Let me know if this was helpful for you. I know this was a question I had before, so hopefully this has answered some questions for people who have asked what the difference is. Anyway, I appreciate you guys and have a wonderful day. Bye. Oh, also don't forget, you can save 20% on the Colourarte website using my code. and it's listed in the description box below. So don't hesitate to take advantage of that. Okay, bye.